Well, welcome. Thank you for joining in here. It's great to be able to chat through and introduce the new leaders of the Adobe Certification organization. And obviously, Adobe is such a massive organization, and it's great to be able to put faces to people who are actually heading up these new responsibilities now as they have been migrated from Magento over into Adobe. So, just a quick introduction about Liz and Tyler. Maybe if you want to, Liz and Tyler, if you want to, say exactly what you do. But Liz is the director of this certification strategy and credential at Adobe. So she's also, it's pretty cool, on the board of directors at the International Certification Council. And she's managed other certification programs. So in other words, the person that's coming in here and taking over this this Magento certifications is not someone who's unfamiliar with certification development in the past. And then Tyler, he has, again, done a lot of this stuff in the past, and he manages the Adobe Credential Program. So from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, that sounds like basically what, you're going to be the one that's especially responsible for Magento certifications. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
All right. Well, very good. So maybe, Liz, you want to take a moment and just say hi and what you are as what's your responsibility here is, especially with this migration as transitioning from Magento certifications into Adobe certifications.
Sure, because that's a funny story. I'll try not to take too long at it, but just one quick correction because it matters. I'm not at a director level here at Adobe. I'm at a senior manager level. So, but with regards to the transition, since November or October last year, I've been working with Magento U to talk about the best way to migrate. So this has been in conversation for a while and in planning their systems and whatever. But for the most part, Tyler really drove the plan, and he has a ton of experience. So there were a couple people he was working with on the Magento side and then on the Adobe side, and he was driving the plan. But then Tyler went out sick for 5 weeks, and all with the transition to do on our own.
Yeah.
So I know that there's been some hiccups, but I'm going to take responsibility for that, because when Tyler was unavailable, I had to step in, and it's
what managers have to do.
Detail, and it was the big shoes for me to fill, and the team that did it. So we did manage to get it accomplished. We did manage to meet the date. Even without Tyler here, but that was kind of the interesting aspect of the integration, that we plowed forward to make sure we delivered what we had promised we would deliver, but we had to do it without one of our key knowledgeable, experienced guys on the team.
That's tough. Yep.
But he's back tough now. So
yes,
we're very happy about that.
And smiling and happy, so that's good. We're all happy then. That's good. So Tyler, maybe you can tell us a little about what your roles, and we'll dig in a little bit later here exactly as far as what this transition has looked like from Adobe's perspective. Obviously, there's plenty in the community that sees it from the external perspective, but I'm sure there's a lot that has gone on behind the scenes in getting to this point. So, but maybe first you can just share a little bit about your background and what's gotten you to this place at Adobe.
Great. Well, thank you, Joseph, for the opportunity to be here, and welcome, Magento. It's been a great journey, as Liz mentioned. With me being out for 5 weeks, I can't express enough gratitude for Liz and the team to be able to step up and make this transition as smooth as possible. My apologies to the Magento team if there's any hiccups. I take full responsibility, because as part of the integration, it's a huge amount of effort. I mean, we're talking about a massive program, a lot of records, a lot of candidates, and the planning was in place with the last minute check with me being out, all hand on deck, and I just want to say thank you to the team. My experience is that, as Liz mentioned, I have over 20 years of experience. I have gone through many different merger and integration. My prior role from Adobe is I was with Hewlett Packard for 19 years. I ran the HP Certified Expert 1 program. And as you know, at that one time, we did a huge merger between Compaq and HP. So we went through this exercise before. It was huge, massive. So my experience was be able to bring that to the table, work with this and team, and kind of learn from best practices. The benefits of us going to Magento is we recently did the same thing with Magento. So we had that learning experience that we were able to work out some of the kinks and be able to take those lessons learned and apply to Magento. So I think overall, the team did a tremendous amount of work. There's still obviously room for improvement. So over the next week or two, we will continue monitoring any of the challenges, any of
Hmm.
the issues that have been identified by our Magento community, and we will continue working aggressively to make sure those issues are minimized and quickly resolve them. So that way we can move forward with the program and really begin adopting and growing the base, right? I mean, Magento is
Definitely.
very energetic and wants to be a part of the One Adobe. So we are here as a family to make sure that we embrace and support this transition as
Hmm.
smooth as possible.
Sure, absolutely, and I definitely understand it. It takes me back, thinking about this, and the the Magento community has obviously been through some transitions over the years. It's funny, like, and also the certification program. Back 2011, when I got involved in Magento, that's where we started out on the certifications. Well, that's what I started doing, taking certifications, and you might say back then it was certainly a little bit interesting. The not scenario based questions, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that was involved there. And then it was, I think, 2018. Well, 2015, Magento 2 was launched. Big deal that was. And then 2018 is when Peter Manajak stepped in. And, I know, just again, on behalf of the community, we're all extremely grateful for his investment in this program and his thought leadership that he brought to this table. And how he got this sort of program to where it is. Because ultimately, the thing was, back in the Magento 1 days, it wasn't as much of a credential as I think it is now. And so now, with bringing it into Adobe, this Adobe banner over, I think adds even all the more value to these credentials. And so I think there's great value that is being added to the credentials, and that definitely continues on. And so obviously, the community in general has reservations. I don't think this community likes change, but my goal with this conversation is just to show where you guys are at where we're looking at and where you're going with this. And I think there's, it's this communication, this conversation that is so important in making it, in reducing those concerns and just showing, hey, look, this is where we're going, and this is what we're going to do. So I guess I'm on a little bit of monologue here, but I'll throw this one other thing in here. I feel like in some ways I've kind of do represent the certification community for Magento. And so for those of you that are watching this and as part of the community, one thing I would suggest is to make sure that we treat Adobe, I would say, with kindness and respect. I've seen some of the communications that have gone back and forth, and obviously I have no idea about the emails, but they're people just like us, and we want to encourage and build them up, because I think through this transition, we all win. With Adobe wins, the community can win, and if we work together and partner as fellow human beings, and so I guess I would just throw that in there. So, anyways, that's good.
Just
I think, yeah, please.
say one thing to that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do want to say is my team,
Yes.
Tyler and the folks on the candidate support team understand that this is change and it's frustrating.
Yep.
And so when the tone of the email reflects that, I completely get it.
Yes.
What I am finding is that once we're able to address their questions and respond, people, the stress is reduced, and we're getting some very nice collaboration. I'm loving being
awesome.
on that Slack channel.
Yes. Yes.
So,
and let's keep that up.
We've been there. We understand.
That's good. Absolutely. And I agree. It's, I think the word you just used there, trust, I think that is the key word in this whole process. It's anything there's time, there's new, we have to rebuild trust. And obviously trust had been built up with the previous Magento program. There's a lot of trust there. And obviously that trust continues through for the credentials themselves. But as you all have stepped into this, the community is building this trust. And again, I think that's why it's important to get your faces here in front of the community to say, hey, look at these people. Here's what they're saying. Here's this process that we're all working through together.
Can I speak to that as well?
Please.
I know you have some questions you want to ask us, but that's a great point. So first of all, and you've helped to explain this, between us, Tyler and I probably have 40 plus years of experience managing certification programs of all sizes, starting them, managing them. So we have experience. The other thing is I became aware of the trust issue when we talked about expirations of certifications? And I know that's a question, and I'll wait until
Coming up, yes.
I know you want to talk about that. But
Mhm.
Some of what's going on in those discussions is a trust issue, is where we need to help the Magento community understand that they can trust us, that we're not out there to completely screw up their investment and their certification. So I'll wait for that conversation, but that's been an interesting example of where I'd like to make sure we earn the trust of the Magento community.
Definitely. I
That's
totally
a
agree.
great that's a great point. And one thing I'd like to add is that just reassure that we are very open-minded, and that every time we implement changes, we usually go and vet it out across the organization, but also reach out to our strategic partner and our key partners. Because at the end, our program is based on the adoption. We're not going to put something out there because we think this is how Adobe is going to drive it. We put our products out there based on what the demand needs, what our partners are looking for, and how we can ensure that the partner has what they need to be successful. So as we go through this transition, our commitment, Liz and I, is to make sure when we implement these changes, we will vet it through, listen to everyone, get the feedback. There will be certain that we will implement based on feedback, and there's other we have to implement based on the overall strategy. But our commitment is we will vet it through. You won't see us turn the dam on and tomorrow something just happened.
Right.
So that's one thing we want to reassure you as part of
Okay.
this transition, that we will work with our teams across the organization and externally and internally to make this happen.
Mhm. That's and as you well know, the Magento community is very vocal, and so. But ultimately, I think it's vocal because, and I'm sure maybe you've experienced this in other communities, but then again, I keep hearing this is unique to Magento. So, as someone who's been in Magento for most of my career, I don't have a huge amount of experience outside that, but I very much have appreciated how tight knit this community is, and how, I would say, deeply invested so many of the members are. And I would say that's as evidenced by the adoption of the certification program. Just because, I mean, what is it, 9,000 developers, if I remember correctly?
Almost,
Yeah,
almost.
almost 9,000 developers. And that's a lot of people, especially for just call it a shopping cart or a e-commerce platform, And so people are very invested in it. And so and I think that's why it's good to have these conversations. Let's jump into that question that we've kind of been talking about here for the last little while, and that probably the number one question of this whole time is certification expirations.
Yep.
Obviously, there's been some confusion about, is it happening 2021? Is all my certifications expiring then? For people like me, I have every Magento 1 and Magento 2 certification other than order management. So it's like, am I going to lose all my certifications? And honestly, for those that are in India or Europe or South America, or some of these certifications then end up getting expensive. If it's at $300 every 2 years, how is that going to work? I guess we could, yeah. So maybe we could start with just, is there going to be, well, I'll just straight up ask this question. Is there going to be an expiration date for the Magento certifications?
So the answer to that question is most likely yes. I'll
Okay.
just be completely transparent because that is how we roll here at Adobe.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is that it is actually a best practice in the industry. And when you think about what Adobe has to do, our first mandate is our customer.
Mm-hmm.
That's our first mandate. And our first
Right.
mandate is to build for the customer an identifiable resource in the marketplace, resource pool that they can draw from, that is current, and that we're validating them on certifications that are relevant and reliable. Those are the standards of our industry. The byproduct is to create a huge marketplace for people with those certifications to go make a career, to go make a business, to go,
Right.
use their passion and their talents. We recognize that, but our first requirement is to that customer. And what Tyler and I want to make sure is in the marketplace for that customer is that relevant and reliable certification. And there are various components of how we do that, but creating an expiration policy is one of those. We've done it with all the DX legacy Adobe certifications. Tyler moved us there in 2019. And we will most likely do it for the Magento and the one Marketo cert that does not have expiration. But as Tyler said, we will not do that without notification. And I do want to apologize because one of the hiccups that I discovered today is that these emails, so there were the 2 emails that announced the change in the FAQs that went out last week, clearly said Magento certifications will not expire. But I discovered today, thank you to all my buddies in the Slack channel. I'm having a good time in there, frankly. I haven't been so involved with candidates in a long time. So Tyler's going to try to tear me away. But anyway, we did find an automated email that said they were going to expire because it had been created for the other DX solutions. We have, because this team is so phenomenal, Tyler and some of the other folks, that is now gone. We acted on it like that. It's not there anymore. It did create a lot of confusion. I want to apologize for that. But the standard line is, yes, we will expire them. Yes, we will take feedback from the advisory board and others, and we will research and understand. Yes, we will communicate that what's going to happen and why. Long transition period. I think we had an 18-month transition period when we did it for the rest of the solutions, or 12 months. There has been questions about a discount, and I forget what the other one was.
Delta exam.
And what?
Delta exam.
Delta exam. We will consider both of those. I'm not willing to commit to them at this point, but we have done both of those things in the past. We had a Delta exam for the AEM on-prem to AEM as a cloud service, and we offered a 50% discount when we transitioned all of the legacy exams. So we have done it in the past. Will we do it? Maybe. I just need time to think about it. We're 1 week into this.
Yes. For sure.
Yeah.
Will we grandfather certifications? Most likely no. Because if you think about the first, and I'm sorry about that, Joseph, I know you have a ton, but if you think about what I said at the very beginning, our ultimate objective is to create something of value in the marketplace. I know Magento certifications have a ton of value, and we don't want to lose that. Our strategy around one of those components is to keep them current.
So one thing I'd like to add too is I think to follow the current, and I think Liz is correct. So we will not ask people to recertify if the content is not going to be different. So our commitment is that recertification is to make sure it's current. And with software, as you know, it will change rapidly. We have situation where the solution or the technology hasn't changed enough, so we decide to extend the expiration date. So our commitment is not just to put a hard 18 or 24 months, you have to recertify. We look at the technology, we look at the solution, we look at where the market is at, and if it's required for us to renew the recertification, we will make sure, number one, the exam is updated, the content is updated, and we will push it out as part of recertification. We will not recertify something because, hey, it's been 18 months, so therefore go take the SIM exam. That will not happen from us.
I totally I do agree with the whole recertification stuff. I know in the community there's people on both sides of the fence, passionately on both sides of the fence, and I think the expense, is a big deal of this. Especially you have some of the bigger agencies, Blue Acorn, Cora, Vamo, and a whole bunch of others, which. Yeah, I think I heard like some of those. They have almost 200 certifications. So if that was the case, that's a lot of money every year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is. But I very much see your point in that when I took the professional developer test, I don't remember what version of Magento it was, maybe 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4 have come out since then, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff that's happened. I mean, I would say maybe 50% has probably stayed this 75%. Actually, if I was to put a number on it, has probably stayed the same, but there's new features, there's changes that have happened in that system. And the certification that I got was for that time. Maybe one other idea, just to throw this out there, and this might create a whole bunch of challenges, is to put a version number on a certification. Just again, throwing this idea out there, just put a version number. So I got certified, I'm guessing it was 2.2. Professional developer 2.2. So then someone can come up to 2.4. It's all kind of the same thing, but the expiration date is this very, very sure way to make sure that happens.
Yeah. And I've seen the version number idea, and we'll absolutely consider it.
Mhm.
We also need to then talk about the Adobe engineering, because all the other Adobe products don't necessarily have version numbers because there's continuous updates. So we're
Mhm.
moving to continuous updates. I don't know if the Magento product is headed that way. There is a little bit of learning that Tyler and I need to do, and the team
Yes.
around the product itself. So again, that's why we can't make any commitments at this point.
Yeah.
We need to learn more.
Right.
Absolutely. I
What,
definitely
but
understand.
one thing you can assure is that when we do update this certification, it will be a different exam ID, exam number.
Mhm.
So that's how you differentiate between what version or the other. So we might not put the
Ah.
version in the certification title, but the actual exam ID or the exam will change. So that's how we track
Mhm.
between version by using the exam, because we know that when we update the exam, it's obviously new content, new version.
Mhm. Yeah.
So instead of putting the title, we actually put in the exam.
Okay. That's good. That's good. All right. Oh, another thing I'm actually really curious about is I think it was it earlier this year? I can't remember exactly when you sent out a survey, and there were a whole bunch of questions. I can't even remember exactly all the questions, but it's obviously the results of that aren't published and to be expected, but it'd be really fascinating to hear some of the thoughts that you all heard from the certification from that certification survey, and then maybe how that influenced coming into this transition, this Magento Adobe transition. If there's things that you can speak to about that.
Sure. I can speak to some of the high level. I'm not going to go into all the details
Mhm.
because we would take too long.
Yeah, definitely.
So we did have a pretty good response on that survey. It was the first one that we've done here at Adobe.
Hmm.
We had a little over 1,100 people. Now, what I'd like to do is begin to do this every year. And I found in past organizations that when you do that, you begin to get more and more people. There were a couple, so the survey had a couple of objectives. One of it was to measure the individual candidate experience and benefits. And
Hmm.
I'll speak to some of those highs and lows. There was a whole nother section where we were talking about how valuable is the credential to the practice itself. So this is the people that have 200 certified individuals and stuff. So
Right.
that was driven by our partner organization with the intent of modifying our partner programs to address some of the feedback on that. And I'm not going to go into that. I want to deal with kind of the individual
Hmm.
responses. So
Yeah.
we did get to the highs. I was thrilled to see that we had about 95% of the respondents said that they would recommend the Adobe certification to
Hmm.
others. So that
Yeah.
was huge. And they said that they would recommend it for the personal and professional benefits that they received from their
Mhm.
credential. That's exactly where we want it to be.
Definitely.
About 40% said that they saw a salary increase after being certified. That's also
Hmm.
something that we like to
Absolutely.
see. And I do know that the Magento certifications appear on that CertMag salary survey really
Hmm.
high. And that is something we want to help to maintain and actually maybe get the other Adobe certs engaged in that kind of
Yeah.
measurement.
Yeah. Peter was always sending those
Oh, yeah.
articles trying to get the feedback on that. So that's really cool to see that, that whole program, 40%. That's, I guess I'd say the other 60%, maybe they should, I don't know, they should work on negotiating a little bit more because those
Right.
certifications are really valuable.
Well, we had not so highs or a little bit lower that I saw, which is only 22%
Mhm.
earned a new job, and only 27% got promoted. So those are areas maybe for us to work on. I'm going to speak to that in a minute.
Mhm.
But I do want to mention that we also asked them what they thought of this new tiered structure, which the Magento folks are now seeing for the first time. We only implemented it in like February or something of this year. And that's the
Okay.
professional expert master tiered
Hmm.
program. We just rolled that out. And the response was skewed. There was
Okay.
50% or more than 50% that liked it, but then there were 24% that actively disliked it. And
Hmm.
and I'm being completely transparent here, they actively disliked it because of the perception of the cost and the time to work up the stack. But one
Hmm.
of the things that I want to let me talk a little bit about this, Joseph, for a minute,
Sure.
in terms of why we do some of these things. It goes back to that comment about making sure that this certification is viewed in the marketplace as relevant and reliable, because
Mhm.
it only matters if people are paying attention to the credential when they're going to higher skills.
That's for sure.
So the tiered structure is a best practice in certifications to identify people growing up a career stack. The expiration renewal, we talked about that. That's part of that. We have a robust exam security process. People will see that when they take our tests. We don't pass them right away. We tell them if they've met our cut score, and then we analyze every exam result against a set of exam fraud techniques or calculations. And so we only award certifications when we know that people haven't violated certain exam security thresholds that we have set.
Okay.
So, and what we do need to do is something that I think the Magento team did really well, which is promote the credential in the marketplace. And that's something I'm learning from the prior management structure, that whole cert salary and the promotion. So you will see us commit to driving the value into the marketplace of these credentials to keep it up where it was for Magento. But we're adding to it, I think, these things that are built into the Adobe program that help us speak to the value of that credential.
Okay, that's good. One thing you mentioned, I want to just get your thoughts on this, is you mentioned that people will not know immediately whether or not they pass the certification. Could you elaborate on this? I'm not asking to know your security protocol, because that's really important to make sure that the exam stays secure, and that's critical. But can you, is it going to be an hour later? Is it going to be 2 weeks later? Like when would I know, when I go ahead and take one of these recertifications, when am I going to know that I passed, or shucks, I failed?
So immediately upon taking the test, and Tyler's going to have to correct me if I say anything wrong, but it should work this way. Immediately upon taking the test, you will see your score.
Okay.
Just like everywhere else. And it will say whether you pass that score. And so we call that a provisional pass, but it's a pass that you will know immediately. The only thing that will cause a problem is if we identify a violation of an exam security, which is things like our retesting policy, collusion, prior access to the exam content, some other points.
Right.
The only thing that will cause a problem is that, and then I think it's not even, it's 24 hours and it rolls into a queue, and we address that queue every day. And so if there's any delay, maybe 48 hours, maybe 24 hours.
Right.
Tyler, that's true, right? We do have that SLA.
That is correct. Typically, it takes 24 hours for the results to flow between our test delivery provider into our candidate management systems. If those records flow across with no security flag, it will happen instantly and it'll trigger out the message. As Liz mentioned, if anything is in violation, it go into a queue, and then there will be someone review it. And depending on the action, we either approve it, which then either pass or fail, or we will take the appropriate action based on the incident. But on average, between 24 to 48 hours for the results to be processed and uploaded into their history. Very good. Okay, that's fair. Definitely makes sense. So yeah, that's great. Let's talk about Magento 1 certifications. It's an interesting subject. I know there's quite a few people in the community who are very passionate about Magento 1. Obviously, Adobe, for good reason, you cannot support a product forever, has moved on to Magento 2. Obviously is no longer selling Magento 1 certifications since at least last year, if not the year before, I can't remember. So what's the plan? I've heard something about a phase 2 coming in October and Magento 1 certification showing up then. Was that something was that accurate that I saw there, or what's your plans in regard to that?
That is accurate with a subtle difference. So by October 31st, the team tells me that the M1 certifications will be put into CertMetrics. So anybody will be able to see Adobe Credential Manager. That's the appropriate branded name. CertMetrics is our internal nickname for it. So they will have an accounts in there, and their M1s will appear. We had not intended to release digital badges for those. or logos for those. So we had
Okay.
not intended to release any branding for the M1s. Now, what I feel comfortable saying, and I'll let Tyler, we haven't talked about this because it's all happened so fast. We are willing to reconsider that, and we would probably come back to you, Joseph, and to the advisory board to get opinions on whether or not we should digitally badge and logo the M1s, allow the branding up there.
Mm-hmm.
That is not something I've committed to, but that is something that I'm committed to finding out more about. I'll probably come to the advisory board with that question.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fair
I
enough.
guess second question is there a value and there's perception need for Magento 1, I guess, Joseph, right? And it would be very helpful
Right.
because digital badge has some kind of meaning. We don't want to just issue our digital badge just to issue our digital badge.
It's
But if
fair.
there's relevant out there that Magento 1 is still a high demand and we
Mm-hmm.
want to provide those who invested and continue to recognize them, we are here to support that. We just don't want to flood the market with unnecessary digital badge if it's not necessary. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
point one. Point two is Liz are correct about October. It's part of the overall strategy. At the time we look at the integration, we want to make sure that we integrate what is the most critical to our customers. And we felt like because of Magento 1, we're not saying it's not as important. We have to break, divide, and conquer. So we focus on Magento 2
For
first
sure.
to get all that in, make sure we, anything that is missing, we want to address it. Then we go
Mm-hmm.
back and address Magento 1. Imagine bringing all those records over at once. Then when there are issues, then we're trying to figure out is it Magento 1 or Magento 2. So that's really a business decision and a strategy that when we brought
Yes.
the team together, we strategized. So just wanted to make sure everyone understands is that we value the Magento 1, but it was
Yes.
about strategize and look at what we want to bring in first and look at the phase approach. And that's where you see phase 2 in October.
Yeah. And I, I see both sides of the whole, do we include Magento 1, Magento or not? And the one feedback, and you might have already heard this from the community, is there's just still just a truckload of merchants on Magento 1, and for them, it's working okay. And so that is a way for them to verify at least someone's relevance in that line, in that platform. Again, Magento 1 and Magento 2 are so different, but it totally makes sense. That's still up in the air. You divided and conquered, and we now have Magento 2 migrated in. And so it's obviously something that you guys are still working through going forward.
Yep.
Another thing is the whole certification directory. And it was obviously a very much beloved part of the Magento program, certification program, and that's gone. It redirects to the Adobe certification, learning certification page, something like that. And there's been maybe a little bit of heartburn about that. But maybe you can talk me, the community, through what your thoughts were in relation to what the value that the certification directory provided, and maybe if that has changed since its inception. I'm guessing it was 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. It's kind of when it got launched in the first place, which is only 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is 100 years in digital terms,
Yeah. So I believe that the directory provided tremendous value to the individuals that were certified, as well as the organizations that were trying to find people who were certified. Completely get that. Adobe has a policy with regards to certifications of not creating any kind of marketplace, if you will, where our partners' employees, where there's any perception that Adobe is supporting the recruiting of individuals from one partner to another. We are committed to our partners. Our partners invest a lot of money in getting their teams trained and knowledgeable and certified, and we respect that. We respect that investment. So it's an Adobe policy of the partner program. So when the directory came up for discussion, that policy came out. Now, that said, what we're working on, so that's an Adobe branded portal for that kind of activity. And we know that wasn't the purpose of the directory, but there's just the perception, right? And the unintended consequences. So what I know Tyler is working on with our branding platform, Credly, is for them to build something like a directory that would not only take your Magento and Adobe certifications, It would also allow you to display any certifications you have that were part of the Credly platform, because they handle Cisco and Microsoft and all those others.
Mhm.
So I know that we have been in discussions with Credly about whether or not they can do this. I also know some of the other individuals, yourself and some others, have talked about building one. And can we partner in that area? Possibly. But there will
Mhm.
not be an Adobe branded directory as
Yeah.
far as I know.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you? Do you understand? Is that
Absolutely. Well,
okay?
and I just wanted to throw out there as well that in some ways I think that LinkedIn has taken a good portion of the value that the certification directory used to have. And LinkedIn, obviously, again, in terms of digital years, is fairly established, but I don't think it was hardly around in 2010 or
Yeah.
2011, whenever that certification directory came out. And in that way, LinkedIn, I think, provides an even fuller picture of what a candidate has done and their experiences, their work experience. They can describe themselves, of course, put their pretty picture up there. The whole list is there. Their school, et cetera. So, and that's where I think the value has transitioned, especially away from being focused on that certification directory to other marketplaces to show someone's value in that way.
I'm glad you brought that up, Joseph, because I was going to comment on that. And
Mm.
secondly, with us implementing now Magento to the additional badge at Clam, I think you can still drive that same outcome, right? Because with the platform now, anyone should be able to go in and search for that certification credential within that
Mhm.
individual. So with those two in place, I think there's different ways to still get the same information and still promote and drive that brand recognition for those individuals.
Exactly.
I'm curious to hear though, like you mentioned, is certification directory, it is something that obviously the Magento folk has been embraced over the last couple of years or 3
Hmm.
years. The question is that really necessary going forward? Because it's not something that we object to it, but we just want to make sure long term, is that necessary, given that we have LinkedIn, given that we have Facebook, given that we assign additional badge? Could all that be a more powerful way to really provide that brand recognition?
Right. And less maintenance for Adobe
Exactly.
or Credly. In that
Always.
case,
Right.
I know how that works. You built something custom and you got to maintain it because it's
Yep.
not going to keep working.
Yep.
Going to be something. That's good. That's good. And I appreciate hearing your all thoughts on this. Let's talk about future plans. So I think we've worked through the major issues that have kind of surfaced through this uh, past week. Again, we're only a week into it, but let's talk about going forward because there's again the new people, new management over this, and so by virtue of that, there's going to be differences in opinion, and how things have been managed previously versus going forward. And obviously, again, we have the history of the past 2+ years, well, 10 years ultimately, but 2 years with Peter, and now it's Liz that has taken over this, and Liz and Ty. So, what are some of your future plans that are public, of course, that you can share with? How is this program going to look? Maybe in reference to content updates, new certifications. Like, what can you share with the whole community as far as what's coming up in the pipeline?
Sure. I can share a little bit of our process, which is a little bit different than, but not a whole lot different than, frankly, it was done previously.
Mhm.
But that said, I can't tell you what we're building, but I can tell you the process that we will follow. So we do maintain a 4-quarter rolling roadmap of exams that we develop. We currently manage 38 exams, I think,
Wow,
Tyler, and
That's
Magento
correct.
adds their additional 8, I think.
wow,
Um,
it's a lot.
yeah, it's a lot. We do have a process for making sure that we know 12 months out what we're building, and we can communicate that. We build our exams very similar to how Magento did. First of all,
Okay,
they're all scenario based. We use subject matter experts. We fly everybody in. We actually pay for everybody to fly in. So
Oh,
that's
okay,
different. Whereas,
yes, it is.
yeah,
mhm.
we know that the Magento community loves it so much they'll pay for themselves, but at Adobe, we pay for people to fly in. We don't pay time, but we pay for people to fly in. And we have these live workshops where we
Mhm.
actually get the test developed by the people doing the job that we're trying to certify. That goes
Mhm.
back to my reliance and reliability, right? It's key to the quality of what we offer to the marketplace. And unfortunately, we're not doing that right now, but we are doing virtual and we are having some success. So our roadmap development has not stopped.
Wow,
I
okay.
love my team, and this team is just building exams to our roadmap despite everything that COVID has thrown at us. So they're
Which
amazing.
it's kind of stopped everything else.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, they're
It,
amazing.
it,
So
it,
yeah,
it's scary, Joe. I'm sorry, Liz. It's scary right now. We're talking about 38 plus the additional 8, and we're trying to maintain it across the 18 months cycle where our commitment is trying to refresh the content. Because at the end, we
Yes.
want to make sure it's relevant. So when you ask about recertification, we take it very seriously because when we say we're going to
Yes.
put something out there, it's a huge investment for Adobe too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that means that we are committed to make sure that every 16 to 18 months, we are updating the exam. We don't have an option when we do that. So that's why when we push this program out is we are looking at the individual, we look at the customer, we want to make sure that they have the most up-to-date information and they carry that brand and that brand is current. So that's
Yes.
why it's something that we're looking at. So one of the things we're going to look at, Liz mentioned, is the next 4 quarters is that where's Magento M2? When was the last time it's updated? How does it align with our overall recertification strategy for the next 2 or 3 years? And then how do we roll that into our development roadmap? So all that has to be in the planning over the next several quarters to determine how the change management happened as part of the Magento products. And in addition, obviously, we need to leverage our advisory, right, to understand what's out there, understand our current exam, and understand what's coming out over the next 6, 12, 18 months to kind of really build that roadmap.
Definitely.
One thing I want to say to that point, though, is I do know that one thing that the Magento organization was able to do is iterative updates. So
Yes.
I do know that Peter and team would pull together and write a couple of questions and update the exam. That is not our current practice. We're not able to do that, but I do want to explore that more and see how that worked and see if that's how we do the Magento exams, if we even need to do it. I don't, it depends on the update or refresh cycle that our product team will start to implement around Magento.
Right.
But we do have this 18-month renewal cycle that is different than what the Magento credential program did.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. I had the pleasure of being able to participate in a couple of those updates, and to be honest, they were a lot of fun. So,
yes.
But it's all a matter of writing questions. I think the updates a matter of how many questions one writes versus, if it's just updating, refreshing, tweaking versus a whole. I'm guessing a new exam. Maybe is that the Adobe practice is basically a rewrite. Is that how it works?
We do a whole rewrite. Every question. Well, we bring in some old questions if they're still relevant, but really it's a significant rewrite of the entire test versus iterative rewrites of the test over a period of time.
And we go through the complete process, job task analysis, the whole process. And then we
That'd be a lot of work.
Yes, it is. So that's why it's a huge investment for us when we do a rewrite. It's not one of those where we go in and modify 5 or 10 items. We actually rewrite the entire exam.
Wow. Yeah. I wouldn't envy your job then in that case. That would be a lot of work. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. All right. Well, I think that was about all the questions that I've heard that I've had presented here. So, I think the one last thing, and this was something, Liz, you had brought up, was preferred communication channels for hearing about these Adobe certifications. Obviously, there's been emails that have been sent out. There's now the Slack channel for in the Magento engineering Slack area. But maybe you could respond to this LinkedIn post and just share what's your favorite way to hear from Adobe is, just to make sure you get communication loud and clear as soon as possible.
And just that's something you're asking your audience, right?
Yes.
Because that was something I wanted to know. How do we communicate with you guys? We did also learn today through the Slack channel that there's a Twitter account out there that we were not aware of. It was not part of what the program management transitioned to us, that there was such a Twitter channel out there. And I'm trying to get ownership of that. It's called Magento U. It'll probably be EOL because of the branding. But if Twitter is an audience that you need us to, or a channel you need us to communicate on, let me know. Because we haven't done it before for the Adobe certification program. I did it for previous programs. But we could always launch one if that's,
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Well, Liz, Tyler, thank you for coming on here and chatting and sharing. I know the community would be grateful to hear, and again, it's one thing to read something, but it's also really, really good to hear the why behind it. And I hope we've been able to pull out some of those whys to be able to share it with the community and, again, field their feedback, because I know the Magento community is very vibrant, and more than happy to share the feedback, which is really good. And I think that's contributed to the overall success of this program of Magento in general, now that Adobe has purchased it for that wonderful sum. That is a lot of money. But it's definitely, it's good to see continued forward progress and as always, these new ideas, et cetera, coming in. So thank you for your hard work on this.
Great. Thank you, Joseph, for the time.
Thank you.
Very good chatting here.